I'm a big fan of the weather. She ain't bothered by change. Me, I need mental shots, light cane, just to get me through the day. I count my time in weeks and leap years, 'cause it feels like slowing down. But the trouble I've been finding out is you can't turn no time around. Ain't no telling where I'll be when the sun come up tomorrow. So make me laugh, make me cry, read me something happy from the Bible. Lord, I know I'm not insane, just I took a turn off memory lane. And did I pray? Or didn't I pray not to forget you before I'm gone? Before I'm gone.
I like to make things. I like to make things with my hands. But let's not confuse that with being good at making things. I think if you scrutinize my build, you would see that there's plenty of flaws and it looks very much like a garage built speaker. And if that's something that bothers you, there are avenues that we've talked about in the introductory video about having these look a lot nicer than what I've done. I did this as a DIY strictly to save money, basically. And this gets me into a loudspeaker whose sound, the equivalent of which I could not afford. And so what I'd like to do for this video is just go over the design of these, and then in a third video we'll talk about what the sound is like. So, I've talked about what a dipole is and what an open baffle loudspeaker is, and let's start with the base cabinet in this case. And this whole build is made out of 3/4 inch plywood, birch ply, nothing super special. And then I painted it all. So I believe I rattle canned this gray portion, and then the red is actually an Alfa Romeo red. I'm a big Alfisti, even though I've never actually owned one, but I do lust after them. And I actually used an airbrush tool to spray these cabinets to get what is a little bit nicer of a finish than you can get with a rattle can. But if you were to scrutinize this and get in real close, which maybe I'll show you some detail shots of, there's plenty of flaws in this thing, but I'm okay with that. And if part of being high-end for you means it has to look amazing and be just a gorgeous cabinet, I understand that, and I think that's perfectly fine, but you're gonna have to pay for that. So this base cabinet has two CS 10-inch drivers, and this cabinet is what Siegfried called a W frame, I believe. And it has sloping pieces of plywood that go up this way and up this way, and that is where the two drivers are mounted. And so this driver at the bottom during the positive phase pumps out, and this driver, which is mounted the opposite way, when you the positive signal goes backwards in the driver, so that both drivers are essentially pushing their wave out this way, and then when they return to the resting position, it goes out the backside. And that's a little bit different than his previous iterations, which were an H-frame, in which the drivers were facing opposite directions, but they were facing horizontally. This was, according to him, an easier way to build this box than the H. That's why he went with it. And on top of that base cabinet sits this plinth, and this plinth basically holds up the upper baffle. And so what he's looking to do here is actually totally decouple the base cabinet from the upper section. And this base cabinet is got felt under it, which was something that Siegfried talked about doing as a inexpensive way to basically decouple the base cabinet from the floor, to try to just mitigate how much of that vibration is getting into the floor and feedbacking into this upper cabinet. So we've got the base cabinet on felt, we've got this platform that straddles over the top, and then we've got this base which is holding this upper baffle. And so we've got lower mid-range, upper mid-range tweeter, and you'll see that there's a space above that tweeter. And these two drivers are open in the back, and so they're free to basically put the back wave out from there. The tweeter is sort of enclosed in its own housing, so there's no real way for that tweeter to create the dipole effect on its own. And so what happens is, in this space on the back side is another identical tweeter that's wired out of phase so that it creates the dipole effect for the tweeter section. And this baffle is such a weird shape, basically because Mr. Linkwitz was experimenting with different baffle shapes in order to come up with a shape that promoted his even dispersion through all frequencies. And so through his experimentations, this is the baffle design that he came up with that gave him that even dispersion through all the frequency ranges. So that is, basically the cabinet itself. It's not a particularly hard build necessarily. If your toolbox is a handsaw and a hammer, then this probably isn't for you. But it's not particularly complicated, but it also depends on the level of finish that you are looking for and what you expect to get out of it. So, one of the weak points in my build is certainly the cable section, which is pretty unsightly, and I hope to fix that in a future update to these, which we'll go over later. But that when I built my Orions way back, they used the same bass drivers. So when I built these, I was able to reuse those drivers, and I already had the wiring all set up, so I maintained those same wires. And the difference between an Orion and this is a two-way versus a three-way. So there's an extra set of wires that were needed on these upper cabinets. And so that's the gray wire you see is 4 conductors that are running to the 2 mid-ranges. And then the tweeter wire is basically what is the new run that had to be made when you added the third driver. So these are all Blue Jeans cables, and they all run back to, as I mentioned in my system profile, the Emotiva, the XPA Gen 3s, is a two 5-channel amps. So each channel is running one driver. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, I say that, but really the tweeter channel is running 2 tweeters. And then, from the 5-channel amps, we go backward, we get to the ASP, the analog signal processor, which is taking a line level signal and doing some equalization and I believe some phase manipulation as well, that also aids in this even dispersion throughout all frequencies that he was aiming for. So that is essentially the way the system worked. This mid-range driver, these are all CS drivers, but this particular driver is one of the older ones, his original design. And if you go to the Linkwitz store, they have a newer driver, which is magnesium. And so what I hope to do is upgrade this driver to a mid-range out of magnesium. And the other thing one of the things that I don't like particularly is just how kind of unstable this design is a little bit. It's not that rigid. And so I have some thoughts in my head about how to upgrade this upper section, make it more rigid and better supported. And I wonder, what that will do to the sound, to have a much more stable platform for the mid-range to launch from. So we'll see. That's an update that's going to take a while. I have to design it and then get the parts. But that is essentially the anatomy of an LX521.4.